A decade. 10 years can successfully replace a boy's youthful blueprints for the sky with the grounded certainty of steel in a man. But for me, Ethan, one memory remained perpetually an unfinished room: the memory of Maya. I traded our future for a sudden plane ticket to Seattle, a monumental decision made entirely under overwhelming pressure. She met my swift departure with a single word, a no that echoed not as a destructive weapon, but as a lighthouse she consciously built for herself. Today, I returned to face my greatest failure. I stood before her door, feeling the immense weight of the years like a winter coat that never fully dried. I was the architect, returned to the structure I abandoned. I raised my hand, and I knocked. The moment demanded the final question. Does time truly heal old wounds, or does it only teach you how to carry them without bleeding? The hallway offered a distinctive, complex scent of rain and deeply aged paper. A radiator ticked with the steady, constant rhythm of a slow metronome, providing a low, familiar pulse behind the separating wall. I stood rigidly before the familiar green door, the brass number 4 possessing the smooth, worn texture of an old, treasured coin. I raised my hand deliberately and delivered the measured knock. For a full heartbeat, the entire building seemed only to draw a quiet, conscious breath. Then, footsteps sounded softly. The latch mechanism turned slowly. The door opened completely, and there she stood, definitively at 32 years of age. The familiar features of the girl I knew and the novel presence of the composed woman she became were intricately braided together in one entirely composed, unflinching face. Maya. Her eyes widened slightly, yet her shoulders remained completely composed, reflecting an inherent dignity and control in the face of sudden surprise. Ethan, she responded. My name sounded both profoundly strange and entirely right in her voice, a precise echo of a melody learned intimately long ago that still retained all of its notes perfectly. Her hair was neatly pinned back with a simple functional clip. A paint-smudged pencil rested casually and securely behind her ear, a sign of ongoing work. She wore a slate-colored sweater with the sleeves pushed efficiently to the elbows. A slender silver ring, which I immediately registered but did not recognize, adorned her right hand. The apartment behind her exhibited the meticulous, disciplined geometry of her mind. Shelves were in careful order, a leaning stack of heavy exhibition catalogs rested against a wall, and a dry bouquet was situated in a ceramic vase the precise color of cold tidewater. "Hello," I stated, immediately aware that my voice had entirely lost the carefree higher pitch of my 22-year-old self, having definitively gathered something far heavier, something that resonated with the accumulated sound of many miles traveled and countless serious decisions made alone. "What are you doing here?" Her tone was not remotely unkind. It was simply cautious and investigative, like a gallery light slowly being raised to illuminate a delicate work of art, revealing its full reality. I lifted the canvas folio tucked beneath my arm, the one holding the architectural sketches for the Harlem project, then lowered it immediately, understanding that a simple object provided no true answer to her deep question. "I am in the city for professional work, a library branch in Harlem. I encountered your name last week on a poster outside an art space on 24th Street. Curator. I made the deliberate decision to walk to an address I hoped might still be yours. I thought I should knock, just once. I desired to see you, and to express my profound, long-overdue apology for the catastrophic manner in which I departed without a word of finality." Maya held my gaze for a long, searching second that felt vast and unyielding, like standing alone in a great room with impossibly high ceilings. She then opened the door wider, a clear, silent invitation. "You may come in," she granted, the words steady. The apartment offered a faint, lingering, and utterly civil fragrance of freshly brewed coffee and clean linen detergent. A tall window provided a compelling vertical view of 8th Avenue, where numerous umbrellas opened and closed with the delicate mechanical action of dark, synchronized flowers. A small brass lamp cast a clean, isolated pool of light over the coffee table where a slender book lay open, face down, suggesting that the conversation had merely stepped out for a moment with a firm, professional promise of its imminent return. I stood awkwardly in the entry, hesitating slightly, unsure of where to place my feet. "This space is beautiful," I complimented sincerely, meaning the words. "It truly feels entirely like you, constructed with intention." "Thank you," she replied. She closed the door with a gentle, non-committal motion. "Please remove your coat. I will prepare some tea for us." In the kitchen, water rattled inside a kettle, the sound a homely, insistent distraction. I placed the folio carefully by the coat rack and approached the window. On the wall hung a photograph. Two people situated closely in a subway car, their heads tilted affectionately toward one another. The chaotic city reflected perfectly in the glass behind them. The date in the corner clearly stated 2015. "You kept that," I murmured, the quiet recognition tasting of bittersweet youth. Maya returned with 2 steaming mugs and noticed my focus immediately. "It was a very good photograph," she explained simply. "The friend who took it became quite a successful photographer." It was a very good moment in time. She set 1 mug upon the coffee table, then placed the second in my hands, a transfer of warmth. "It was," she affirmed. "Please do not mistake my simple action of keeping a photograph for the active, profound retention of a promise." "I understand completely," I replied, accepting the fundamental distinction she drew. We stood a careful, measured distance apart, like 2 individuals learning a complex, forgotten choreography. "Why today?" she finally asked. "Why this precise moment after so long?" I allowed the words to gather in my throat, choosing only those that carried sufficient weight and honesty. "The project will require my professional presence here for 6 months. I walked past that gallery, encountered your name, and the moment was akin to suddenly turning a corner and discovering a deeply familiar street I once intimately inhabited. I realized I did not wish to depart from New York without attempting to achieve a state of genuine, complete peace regarding what we did to each other when we were young, and afraid Maya examined me carefully, her gaze steady. "You proposed marriage to me in a restaurant with minuscule candles and a menu that conspicuously lacked prices," she recalled, the memory sharp. "You neglected entirely to inform me that there was a plane ticket for Seattle in your inner pocket, scheduled for departure 1 week later. I convinced myself in my arrogance that I was offering a potential grand life," I confessed. "I now realize that I was offering a monumental, life-altering decision under crushing, unfair pressure." At the age of 22, pressure often successfully assumes the distinct, unavoidable shape of destiny. "I possessed an overwhelming number of elaborate plans for my career," I stated, acknowledging my flaw. "You possessed detailed blueprints for the entire sky," she countered, her voice gentle but firm. "But you possessed none whatsoever for us." I took a measured sip of the warm tea, the citrus flavor grounding me. "After your departure," Maya began, her eyes distant as she recounted the past, "I accepted the Brooklyn internship. I worked late, lonely nights cataloging pieces no one would ever see, and I subsequently learned the essential skill of placing every painful hurt within a clean, protective frame and keeping that frame meticulously clean. I believed in my ambition that I was choosing a great city," I reflected. "I subsequently learned years later that I had actually chosen my pride above all else." "Grief is a sculptor," she observed quietly, turning her mug. "It will inevitably find a definitive shape for you whether you are mentally prepared for its creation or not." I directed my gaze downward toward my hands, feeling the old scar near my thumb. "Time does not possess the capacity to truly heal all wounds completely," I stated. "It merely teaches one the difficult, necessary technique of carrying them without perpetually bleeding all over the path of others." "You always possessed the gift of eloquent expression," she admitted. "I will require something more substantial than mere sentences to continue this conversation." "I did not arrive with the intention of rewriting the past," I countered firmly. "I came to read it aloud honestly and finally turn the page completely. I profoundly wish to know the person you have authentically become in this decade. She leaned her hip against the coffee table. I became a person who shows up consistently, she declared, for artists, for my staff, for my mother when the physician called in January, and most importantly, for myself most days. I possess absolutely no desire to reopen an old, musty room merely for the sake of smelling the old, faded paint. I don't wish to hover indefinitely and indefinitely in your doorway, I said firmly. I wish to meet you precisely where you live now, in the present moment, on equal footing. We both glanced simultaneously toward the entry where the canvas folio rested, a silent statement of my work. You are forgiven for the portfolio, she assured me, a slight, knowing smile forming. It is the closed door that remains the primary subject of our necessary discussion. The door I deliberately closed, I conceded quietly. The door you definitively slammed shut, she corrected, but the word was delivered with a surprising lightness, as if she had long since placed the memory on a windowsill to be warmed by the sun. What specific parameters would you like for our conversation tonight, Ethan? She asked. Just the parameters of tonight, not a decade of final answers. Permission to be present and breathe in this room, I stated. Permission to sit down and inquire about the precise details of your day. If that request proves excessive, then permission to walk downstairs and procure 2 coffees and converse briefly under an awning. I will accept whatever the present moment can securely hold without collapsing into the past. She considered the proposition carefully, her expression thoughtful. Coffee under an awning, she stipulated clearly. 5 minutes around the nearest street corner. I would genuinely like that immensely, I confirmed. We stepped into the hallway, and the radiator immediately resumed its low, insistent metronome-like ticking. 5 minutes, she repeated with clear emphasis, a firm boundary. 5 minutes, I affirmed, and if those 5 minutes feel like a tangible, solid beginning, we can then ascertain whether the present moment will securely hold 10. The awning was constructed of faded green canvas, its central seam collecting the rainwater and spilling it every few seconds in a single silver thread. We stood protected beneath the awning and inhaled the mingled, sharp fragrances of espresso, damp wool, and the city's profound, iron-tinged heartbeat. I ordered 2 black coffees, remembering our simple shared compromise from Boston. I handed her a cup, feeling the heat transferring through the paper and into her cool fingers. 5 minutes, she repeated again, the necessary edge on the words noticeably softened this time by shared proximity. 5 truly honest minutes, I specified, meeting her eyes. A large bus sighed to a halt at the curb, briefly exhaled its passengers in a small wave of bobbing umbrellas, and then groaned heavily away. We stood shoulder to shoulder, a slight, careful distance maintained between us, watching the yellow taxi lights smear their glow along the wet avenue. I received your father's obituary from a mutual friend, Maya revealed quietly. I sent you a brief note. I do not know if it ultimately arrived in Seattle. It arrived, I confirmed. I read it after midnight in a hotel in Spokane. I did not respond because grief had successfully concealed the appropriate language somewhere entirely beyond my reach. Your words felt precisely like a hand resting against a door, not pushing, simply remaining there. I should have written back to you. Thank you sincerely for that silent compassion. You are welcome, she replied. He consistently prepared extra pancakes, which remains a very fond memory. He liked any person who posed second-level questions, I noted. You always did so without prompting. She watched the falling rain for a quiet, measured beat. Why did you bring the folio to my home? She asked. I am simply curious about your fundamental, raw instinct to do so. I believe I brought it because I function with greater proficiency with drawings than with formal apologies, I admitted honestly. Lines possess the capacity to keep me steady. They do not possess the tendency to flinch or betray my intent. People do, she observed, but not unkindly, merely stating an undeniable truth. I know this profoundly now, I said. I learned the essential skill of keeping my own company, she shared, looking down at the condensation on her cup. I learned how to constitute a room with securely locked windows and a door that opens only when someone knocks with extreme carefulness and respect. I am present here to knock with all necessary carefulness, I assured her. I can indeed see that careful intention, she confirmed. Tell me all about the Harlem Project. I described the branch on West 135th Street, detailing the planned skylight and the precise way morning light would fluidly slide across a line of book spines at 9:10 in the morning. You specialize in constructing rooms for strangers to experience less loneliness, she summarized thoughtfully. So do you, I countered. You strategically place artistic work on a vertical wall and invite people to observe themselves reflected in the surface of someone else's courage. I am curating an exhibition this coming Thursday, she informed me. A series of thread drawings, lines like persistent rainfall. If you wish to observe strangers actively becoming less lonely, there will be wine served in plastic cups. I would genuinely like that experience, I said. If you would like to test whether a skylight possesses the power to convince you to forgive a roof, you are welcome on a sidewalk tomorrow morning at precisely 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is a notably early hour for undertaking the immense work of forgiveness, she mused, a faint smile touching her lips. Forgiveness is granted the luxury of sleeping in, I responded. Curiosity, however, always arrives promptly on time, regardless of the difficulty. The rain eased, its sound softening to a delicate script. At 22, Maya said, her voice dropping slightly as she recalled the past, you asked me to enter into marriage beneath a ceiling that was painted to resemble the night sky. You had the plane ticket in your pocket. I felt the entire world tilt violently, and I immediately secured myself by grabbing the table with both hands. I distinctly heard myself articulate the word no, and that word felt like a lighthouse, not a dangerous weapon. I tragically mistook your lighthouse for an impending storm, I said, finally recognizing the error. I packed with great speed. I wanted to spare myself the sight of the magnitude of what I had profoundly broken between us. Her voice lowered in intensity. I did not fundamentally say no to you. I definitively said no to vanishing from my own path and purpose. I hear you completely, I stated, allowing the full weight of the sentence to settle. I honor that decision entirely. I profoundly wish I had possessed the capacity to hear it then, 10 years ago. Perhaps tonight courage has indeed pulled up a chair and is currently quietly reading the menu of possibilities. We finished the coffees completely. The heat had entirely faded from the paper cups. I will walk you to the nearest corner, she counter-offered. Equality in all things, is it not? At the corner, she looked directly at me with profound directness. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, she confirmed. I will ensure I bring practical shoes, as instructed. I will ensure I bring a hard hat that possesses the theoretical capability of not messing up your carefully pinned hair, I promised playfully. She extended her hand toward me once more. We shook hands, and then, for one entire breath longer than standard business would require, we did not release our grip. Good night, Ethan, she said, her voice clear. Good night, Maya. I texted a simple photograph of the skylight framing successfully catching the precise light of noon from the construction site. She replied almost instantly with a photograph from the gallery, depicting thread lines crossing like persistent rain. No words, just the expressive, intentional lines. The Harlem branch was situated within a low brick building. At 9:56, Maya appeared at the threshold in her practical shoes. I offered her the hard hat and safety glasses, adjusting the band carefully to protect her hair. This is decidedly not flattering, she observed, but her smile made the entire sentence gentle and entirely forgivable. It smells distinctly of new beginnings and the core of a newly sharpened pencil, she summarized after looking around the cavernous space. We walked the perimeter slowly, respecting the yellow safety lines. What specific life will eventually reside here? She asked, standing deliberately in the footprint of the children's room. Low shelves, I explained patiently. A dedicated listening corner. A rug with gentle, unassuming colors. We compromised on a reading alcove featuring a curved railing, the city itself being an immense, restless ocean. I knelt and placed my hand flat against the concrete floor where the light would fall. Morning light will move precisely to this location at 10:12, I calculated. Children who arrive early will learn the inevitable way light travels without ever needing to be formally taught a lesson. A small boy in a puffy jacket followed his grandmother across the tape line. Maya immediately crouched to his exact height without hesitation. "What name would you bestow upon it?" she inquired. "The Tiger," he announced with conviction and volume. "Excellent," she praised. "Every truly good ship requires a visible stripe of courage for its journeys." Later, climbing a temporary stairwell to the mezzanine, I spoke to her about my father and the architecture of grief. Following my father's passing, I revealed, I developed a habit of arriving extremely early to all construction sites. I would sit alone on unfinished stairs and deliberately listen to the raw buildings breathe. It felt exactly like being situated inside a massive ribcage and waiting patiently for a chest to finally rise. Grief possesses the power to fundamentally change the measurement of time, she reflected. A year can pass with the lightness of a dropped coin. "I am sincerely sorry about your mother's urgent calls in January," I said. "How is her condition now, truly?" "She is clinically stable," she answered, choosing her words with care. Which is a word that constantly asks for consistent gratitude without ever providing any concrete promises. I bring her homemade soup and crossword puzzles. I led Maya to the table where the final drawings lay. I pulled back the sheet. I pointed to the strategic skylight angle. Light must be cast like a gentle kindness, not simply thrown like raw attention. She traced the line precisely with her finger. You speak about light with the same profound reverence that I speak about silence. Perhaps the space between the morning and the full noon is an essential part of your fundamental design. We left the site and walked toward Morningside Park, sitting on a bench and sharing a bagel. I was involved in a long relationship in Seattle, I disclosed, forcing the memory into the light. I was exceptionally proficient at formulating elaborate professional plans and entirely poor at preparing dinner. When the relationship ended, I convinced myself that my demanding work simply necessitated the extreme hours. Later, I realized that my own deep-seated fear fundamentally demanded the miles of separation. I sincerely apologize for everyone I made rehearse a definitive goodbye. Maya tore the bagel precisely in half and offered me the noticeably larger piece. I learned how to constitute a room with securely locked windows and a door that opens only when someone knocks with extreme carefulness, she repeated, affirming her boundary. Will you permit me to actively participate in some of that work alongside you? I requested. Not as a means of rescue, merely as a dedicated colleague in life. I can certainly allow for a clearly defined collaboration, she agreed. We will, however, be required to immediately establish a clear scope and a schedule. Scope, absolute honesty. Schedule, persistent patience. Budget, profound courage, she specified, defining the cost of admission. She scribbled a numerical sequence on a flyer and handed it directly to me. For all logistics, she explained. The gallery on 24th Street hummed with voices and the brittle confidence associated with plastic cups. I watched Maya move gracefully, her composure impressive. I approached the first thread drawing, which mapped the feeling of standing completely exposed in rain and consciously choosing not to run away. Maya arrived quietly at my side. You came, she stated simply. You extended the invitation to me, I replied. I am deliberately learning to accept good invitations and honor them. Presence is truly love's only genuinely fluent language, I stated before I could successfully edit the entire sentence back into unnecessary shyness. A plastic cup fell and red wine created a noticeable comet shape near a piece of art. I moved quickly, found paper towels, and returned immediately, carefully blotting the stain from the edge inward, ensuring the artwork remained untouched. When I successfully rose to my feet, she handed me a clean napkin. Thank you sincerely, she said. I specialize in providing small, rapid rescues, I said. They possess the significant advantage of not requiring any official permit, only quick action. Near the end of the hallway, Mrs. Bennet, Maya's mother, stood watching the proceedings. I introduced myself with genuine respect. "You remembered my specific face," she stated, testing me. "You appear noticeably taller than I remember." "I believe I only stand straighter now," I suggested. "Standing straight is quite sufficiently tall enough," she decreed. She touched my sleeve lightly. "Kindness consistently pays the required rent. Do not ever be late with its payment." Julian, the painter, arrived with a large bouquet. He approached Maya. They conversed for precisely 1 minute. She placed a definitive hand on his forearm in a simple gesture that clearly closed a significant chapter with profound respect. He soon drifted toward the door. Maya returned to my side. "Thank you for allowing that entire exchange to pass without any unnecessary commentary," she said genuinely. "I did not return here to replace your original no with my own yes," I explained. "I returned here to patiently learn its specific grammar and to converse with you authentically in the complete present tense." She turned her head slowly and looked directly at me. "That line is definitely a keeper," she declared. We walked outside. "My mother actually liked you immensely," she revealed. "I am sincerely relieved to hear that. I, in turn, genuinely like her. She specifically asked whether you still habitually carry folded paper in your wallet," she shared. "I do indeed," I confirmed. "I successfully repaired a wobbly table in a restaurant last month and was consequently rewarded with a free dessert." "A temporary solution with permanent aspirations," she recited. At her building, we paused completely. "I am not prepared to make any definitive promises tonight," she stated clearly. "I am, however, in the active process of making a very specific plan." "I will enthusiastically honor a specific plan over a vague promise every time," I stated, acknowledging the value of structure. "Lunch on Saturday," she confirmed, "a place in Washington Square Park where the benches possess genuinely good intentions." Saturday arrived with a bright, hard light in Washington Square Park, transforming the leaves into small, vibrant coins. We sat on a bench and shared sandwiches. "Tell me one thing you genuinely feared at 22 that ultimately turned out to be much smaller than you had originally thought," she requested. "The prospect of living alone," I answered. Later, I slowly learned that silence can indeed be a comfortable room with windows, provided you distinctly remember to open them. "Tell me one thing that ultimately turned out to be vastly larger than you had originally thought." "Pride," I admitted. "Pride is, fundamentally, a house filled entirely with mirrors that relentlessly pretend to be genuine windows, deceiving the occupant." "What truly surprised me with its immense size was pure tenderness," she shared. "It unequivocally demands a far greater strength than I ever believed possible to maintain." "Strength is essentially the specific tool that love must use when love becomes truly tired," I concluded. "Do you possess the desire to have children?" she asked directly. "I deeply desire a life where a child would instinctively find safety and comfort," I said. "I will still build rooms where children can read under a skylight called Tiger." "What do you deeply desire?" "I desire a partnership that profoundly respects sleep," she replied. "And the sanctity of Sunday afternoons. I desire a deep warmth pressed firmly into the very fabric of the ordinary and the mundane." "We possess the capacity to construct that life," I affirmed. My phone rang loudly then, the Seattle number. I looked at the screen and then at Maya, who was watching me. I answered the call immediately, speaking clearly without stepping away. "Hello, Brent. No, I cannot possibly fly out next week. I am completely and professionally committed to New York for the entire duration of the Harlem Project. That is my absolute final answer." I ended the call swiftly, putting the phone away like a tool no longer needed. "You did not explicitly request that I applaud your action," she observed. "I do not require a medal for my actions," I said. "I simply require a life that is truly mine. Showing up consistently is, profoundly, The final shape that an apology must take when all the accompanying words are finally done, she stated. Her phone vibrated suddenly. Her mother's name. She had a transient dizzy spell. I urgently wish to go and see her. She is currently in Astoria. I will certainly come with you immediately, I stated. I will bring sufficient patience. We took the subway to Astoria. Mrs. Bennet opened the door. The room suddenly stepped decidedly to the left, and I consciously declined to follow its lead. I am entirely fine now. I replaced a dimly lit bulb and tightened a wobbly chair leg with folded paper. A temporary solution, I announced, with absolutely permanent aspirations. Mrs. Bennet watched. Kindness consistently pays the required rent, she advised. We left after the dishes were washed. On the sidewalk, Maya took my hand then, very briefly, a check of my temperature, not a declaration. Here is a complete sentence I honestly never thought I would utter, she confessed. I am genuinely glad that you are presently here. Here is my absolute pledge in return, I stated. I am not present here to be completely forgiven for the profound mistakes of my 22-year-old self. I am present here to consciously choose my 32-year-old self and to choose tomorrow and the day immediately following that. We rode back to Manhattan. At her door, she turned the key. Dinner tomorrow evening, she suggested. I will personally cook the main course. You will be responsible for bringing the dessert and one genuine story that you have not previously told to anyone else. I will ensure I bring both items, and I will deliberately leave the folio safely at home. Good. We will intentionally make the room hold only what is absolutely necessary for the moment. Love is not a single definite deadline, I concluded. It is profoundly a purposeful door you must consciously choose to open every single day. She met my eyes directly. Then we will definitely learn the precise hinge mechanisms, she agreed, a small smile appearing. Days slowly gathered and flowed into a gentle chain. We exchanged our apartment keys without any elaborate ceremony in the hallway, while the radiator ticked its familiar small metal witness to quiet vows too intimate for a crowd of witnesses. At the site, the skylight was finally completed. Light now took the entire room in a soft, steady grip, illuminating the space with clarity. On the morning of the library's soft opening, Maya stood quietly beside me under the fully completed skylight. The room echoed with children's feet and the gentle scuff of new shoes. Mrs. Bennet arrived. Do not waste the good moments, she advised me, gripping my hand firmly. It rarely repeats itself exactly. I waited until the initial crowd thinned, letting the principal and councilwoman finish their speeches. I walked toward the center of the children's area, the designated spot for the story hour. Maya, I said, standing firmly at the center of the soft square of light that would soon hold the daily story hour. I would like to speak with you, intimately, where true listening permanently lives. She came directly to me with that familiar composure. At 22, I began, my voice clear in the open space. I posed a question that was fatally constructed like a door specifically meant for definitive leaving. At 32, I have diligently attempted to learn about hinges and profound patience and the essential daily work of deliberate arrival. I do not wish to move you again. I do not wish to attempt to save you. I simply wish to actively build a complete life right beside you and meticulously learn the precise way light travels from morning to noon and back to evening again. Will you fundamentally marry me, not as a means to finally leave something, but as a deliberate choice to stay? I opened my hand and clearly showed her a small, well-worn brass library card that had originally belonged to my father, worn smooth by years of use. I do possess an appropriate ring, I added quietly, but I would much prefer to purposefully begin with this because I believe love is fundamentally a card you intentionally show at a door that asks the profound question, what exactly will you truly care for here? We can consciously choose the final ring together when you are entirely ready for that next step. Silence held for a brief, expectant breath that felt like a clear, deep lake. Maya looked intently at the simple brass card and then directly into my eyes. Yes, she confirmed. Her voice was steady and completely certain, carrying absolute conviction. Yes, because we are absolutely not sprinting blindly this time. Yes, because the work is the true and final answer to the question. Yes, because I would genuinely like to patiently read the remaining days of our life with you, aloud and clearly. She gently took the brass card from my palm and deliberately closed my fingers securely around her left hand, a silent acceptance of the commitment. Trust does not possess the capacity to sprint quickly, I reiterated. It diligently walks the room, finding its footing. It actively takes a seat and conscientiously takes notes, she completed. We walked to the small staff garden, the private space I designed. We sat down together on the new bench. She leaned comfortably into my shoulder. I gently rested my cheek against her hair, breathing in the scent of rosemary and linen. "Begin here," she whispered softly. "Begin here," I echoed back to her, and the new sentence felt like a permanent, foundational truth. A soft, passing breeze gently turned the page. Thank you for watching Second Love Tale. If you truly believe in the redemptive power of second chances and the slow, necessary work of love, please like, comment, and share this story. See you in the next tale, where love consistently finds its true, necessary way again.